Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to explain the movement rules for the game. I've got this example here, I've got a lone T-34 set up just to explain the rules. So the first thing is the hex orientation of the counter is absolutely critical. You can see here the counter is facing into the apex or the spline of the hex that it is in. So it has two hexes to the front, one either side and two to the rear. This is a crucial rule because it helps you when performing combat. So for example, got German Panzer II there, when that fires on the T-34 and conversely T-34 firing on the Panzer II, the fire passes through the front, this hex here, which would be the front, so you know it hits it from the front. So this is correct hex orientation. That is incorrect, as it does not face into two hexes, it faces into one. So this is correct. That is correct, for example, as well. So is that, and so forth. In addition to the orientation, as you move the counter from hex to hex, you can reorientate your counter as you wish. So for example, you can move from there to there and reorientate. It doesn't cost any extra movement points to reorientate the counter, but it does cost one to orientate within the hex you're in. So for example, to clarify that, if you want to move from there to there and orientate, it's one movement point. You basically get the orientation for free. However, if you want to reorientate in the hex that you are in, like that, for example, it's one movement point. And because it's a movement point, the opponent can snap fire on you, which I'll come to in a minute. Each counter has a number of movement points on the bottom left of the counter. This T-34 has 4. 4 is the most common number of movement points in the game. Most tanks have a movement cost of 4. A clear hex costs 1 to move into. If the hex has some terrain within the hex, so for example trees, foliage, they cost more. So for example they cost 2 to enter. So does going uphill, so does entering muddy environments, and so forth and so forth. And they are all detailed in the rulebook, the actual movement costs of the hex. Every time you move, let's use this example here. Let's suppose this Panzer II has a snap fire. What that enables the opposing player to do is, as you move, they can fire on your tank. So if we, for example, if we're here and we move and orientate, or not, but we move, after we've moved, before we continue spending movement points, allow the opposing player to declare if they want to use their snap fire or not. You do not have to spend all your movement points. So with the movement points of 4, if this player simply wanted to move the armour to there, they've only spent, in this example, they've only spent 1-2 movement points. You don't need to spend them all. It's entirely up to you how many. The movement rating that your tank has is simply the maximum number of movement points it can use. However, if you choose not to use them all, then you lose them. You can't carry them over to the next turn. And then the final thing I just want to mention is when you move your counter, so for example, let's say we start there, we go to there, there's no enemy snap fire or anything like that, very straightforward. When you finish doing your moving, place a moving counter either on top or underneath, whatever your preference is. The reason for that is the fact that your tank is moving during your turn has an impact on combat. So it's a good way of recording the fact that your tank has moved. This would remain on your tank until the next time you activate it. So if in the next turn when you activate it, place take the movement counter away and play as normal. So in summary, the key rules to remember: orientation within the hex, facing into one of the corners. As you move, you can reorientate Each counter has a movement allowance. Each hex has a movement cost depending on the contents of the hex. If the opponent has a snapfire counter on a tank, allow them to declare if they want to snapfire after you've moved one hex or spent a movement point, giving them time. And then finally, place a moving counter on your tank counter when you have finished your move.